So to Council Member Shayla, as a council member for the City of Columbus and former Assistant City Attorney, what are initiatives in Columbus that are advancing social justice reform? What role do you think local governments have to play with advancing social justice movements like Black Lives Matter?
Yep, thank you for that question. So, given the recent civil unrest, including the recent critique of the Columbus Police Department's interaction with protesters over the past month or so, Columbus City Council announced that we would embark on a path that would intentionally explore criminal justice reform in Columbus. So, reimagining public safety in Columbus has started with council exploring police demilitarization, hate group affiliation by sworn officers and employees of the Columbus Police Department, the execution of no-knock warrants, and implementing a civilian review board. Over the past 2 weeks, we have held over 18 hours of public hearings on each topic. In fact, we just wrapped up public hearing on the execution of no-knock warrants just this evening before this panel discussion. Our goal is to bring legislation to the table by July 27th, but the real work of criminal justice reform does not and should not happen overnight. And so as chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Committee, I am really focused on creating a criminal justice agenda that is both an informed and collaborative effort with our residents, our legislators, and our police officers. So, and then you had a part two, our role. Okay, got it. Our role with advancing. So what is our role in advancing movements like BLM? For me, it starts with listening, with hosting conversations, and providing an opportunity for advocates to actually advocate. Legislating should not be conducted in a silo. I was elected by this community, and I'm committed to serve on behalf of my community, but that can't be done if my community is not at the table. And so a great example of this is a legislation that I'm currently exploring around prohibiting the affiliation of hate groups by members of the police department. That idea actually came from a member of the community, a teacher, Mr. Austin Owens, who was disappointed by what he witnessed in response to the protests of the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. And so I asked Mr. Owens to participate in the hearing this past Monday. And yes, we had subject matter experts, a professor from The Ohio State University, the Director of Civil Service, Human Resources, and Department of Safety as participants, but I wholeheartedly believe in the value of community collaboration. And you cannot build integrity or trust around the idea of reimagining public safety without reestablishing legitimacy with the community that we're here to serve.
I definitely think I appreciate that you mentioned as a government official that you think it's important to listen to the community members. That is definitely something that we need to do more of in order to understand ourselves better and to be able to connect with each other. So listening is extremely important. So I have a follow-up question to your question, and you kind of already addressed that with talking about defunding the police. So to Mr. Strickland and Councilmember Shayla, do you agree with the movements to defund the police? Mm-hmm. And what are the appropriate solutions to inequality in the criminal justice system?
So I have been very open about my support for, I'm sorry, I keep losing my light, there we go, for reallocating our budget. I understand, I'm an attorney, so the use of words is very important. And defund is it is catchy, it's inflammatory, it gets a response. But quite frankly, there are some things that I find value in as it relates to officers. So let me circle back around. So our officers have been tasked with doing the work of social workers, psychologists, therapists, educators, doctors, et cetera, you name it, right? And I believe this is the opportune time to talk about funding those who are trained to specifically do that type of work and how we invest in our underserved communities. As I mentioned before, I did serve as an assistant city attorney with the city attorney's office, and my job to abate public nuisance properties could not be done without police, and that's a fact. This work, the work that I was doing with the city attorney's office, was removing drug havens, derelict and drug trafficking gas stations and convenience stores. I mean, and true story, I shut a convenience store down that had, an insane amount of crack cocaine in its ceiling. And that specific convenience store was the only means of food in our African-American community. That's unacceptable, in my opinion. That's doing a disservice in our community. And those establishments do not have a place, in my opinion, in our community. And so some of that work has to be done by officers, right? But at the same time, after that work has been completed, right, there has to be support for social workers and educators and so on and so forth that can do the job that comes along with healing our community, with putting our community back together, and to supporting efforts that will prohibit that convenience store situation from ever occurring in our community. And so that's really my thought around this notion of defunding and reallocation, and where my thought process is at the moment.
Yeah, so thanks so much, council member. So I think to that point, I mean, so many great points were just highlighted there. I mean, it's clear that we need to reimagine the way that we define community safety. The facts are that we use as a society police to solve or try to solve every single problem. And in fact, in many cases, they're part of the problem. And so I think when we think of when we think of safety and how to make people safe, and the immediate reaction is just police, it fundamentally misses out on so many experiences and the lived reality of many that police don't necessarily mean safety. And so when we talk about the defund movement, and one, there's so many different movements that are out there to talk about these issues. There's defund, there's abolish, right? There's a lot of different approaches. What I do think we need to move beyond is just mere reform. I think the notion for just reform and just implicit bias trainings have long gone, right? I mean, we are at the point where we have a system that is rooted in the racism that's embedded all throughout our society, and it has created a toxic culture with a lack of accountability. And so when you don't have accountability, of course you're going to see rampant violence happen over and over and over again. And what are you going to do about it? If you are not holding police officers and police departments accountable, then you've got to have a question about where your priorities are. And I think a lot of the discussion is about budgets, right? Budgets are moral documents. Where do we put our money? If we are putting all of our money and all of our resources into our police and to try to solve problems, and instead we are not investing in communities, then we are going to continue to run in the same thing over and over and over again. And here's the thing. I know some people are worried about tactics and language, especially in an election season. But for me, I think the movement is so critical. I think it's so important because it says, look, election season or not, we have to move beyond this short-term cycle of, well, we'll just call for change next time. Or let's maybe just wait, or maybe let's not say anything because that's going to upset some people, when in fact that type of strategy of, well, let's not alarm anyone, let's not be too radical, is what is a part of the problem we're in the first place. We have a system that has been built on this idea that the market or the wealthy are going to solve all of our problems. and just let that trickle down to the rest of us. And it's those bad people, those people who are living off the government and off of welfare that are creating the problems. And that's why we have super predators. That's why we have things like welfare queens and deadbeat dads, all these stereotypes that is designed to make you avoid Black and brown people as ills to the government and to our society. And the only response is to lock them up and throw the key away. That is how we have viewed our society's problems here. And so when we talk about defunding the police, when we talk about transforming community safety more broadly, it is about lifting up the values of people's lived experiences. And if you really care about people, then it means you invest in them. You treat and help and provide them with the support that they need. And it doesn't mean you just police problems every single day. And so I think that's where we need to shift. And people are more upset about tactics than they are about the actual injustice that we're seeing every single day.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're saying the same exact thing. You know, I think, I know that right now the moment has brought us to focusing on safety, but quite honestly, this conversation has to go beyond safety. Police are just one part of this cycle that has to end. And if we're supporting an effort around the mission, the goal of BLM, it has to go beyond just safety too. We've got to demand more from corporate America. We've got to demand more from our educators, from everything that touches our lives. It is up to us to demand more. And now people are listening, right? Allegedly, people are listening to what we're saying. And it's up to us not to, I've gone to so many protests over the past month, because this is not politics to me. This is personal, right? I am a Black person. I care about this. I have Black and brown family members, nephews, husband, right? And so this extends way beyond being an elected official. But what I have said over and over again is that these protests will stop, right? People will grow tired. It will no longer be the sexy, trendy thing to do. And so then what are you going to do? Is this something that you truly care about, something that you're truly willing to continue to advocate for beyond the point of uncomfortability? Because it's getting ready to get uncomfortable, because now this is when the real work begins. It's easy to throw the words out there, right? But it's harder to do the work of actually putting these policies into place that are going to uplift the Black and brown communities.
I'm glad that you both mentioned that defunding the police doesn't mean that we're thinking of abolishing the police department, that it's more so reallocating our funds and investing in the community, investing in the people. Yes, you can go, Kyle.
I just want to be very clear. Some people, it does mean abolish, but not everybody. But I just want to, some people do think defund on the route towards abolish. I do want to clarify that, because some people are like, no, like that's what we mean. So I did want to add that there's a lot of different interpretations as well.
Kyle, aren't you a lawyer?
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. Specifics on the language. Yep.
Thank you for the clarification, because for me, at least, it can be confusing. And I'm sure there are, like you said, people who do mean to abolish. And then there are people who mean, no, we just want to redirect the funds so that we're addressing the healthcare system that needs help, the educational system that needs help, housing, because there are more Americans that are experiencing homelessness every day, and we need more employment opportunities. So thank you both for your comments on